Hello, everyone. This is Matt here and Derek. You know us from some of the other webinars that you've done, but Derek here is our PhD geneticist. Shane won't be here. He's actually at an event right now speaking. So we're going to take over for today. And for this entire webinar, if you have questions, put them in the box over there, the Q&A. We do have a chat and we have the Q&A. The Q&A, those questions we'll actually answer live. And if we can't get to them today, don't worry about it, because I, as one of the reps, we can go through and get your questions answered. If we don't know them, we can have somebody, we got microbiologists here, we got geneticists, we got Shane, we got a lot of educated people that can answer those questions for you if we don't get to it today on the webinar. So today we're going to be talking about the next two panels in our DNA report. So today is all about understanding that my DNA testing that we do. We've actually used a lot of these so far, and from what I've been seeing, it's been extremely useful for people in their practice to be able to actually really pinpoint exactly what these cause and effect problems are and the etiology for what somebody's going through when they have a disease state. So it's been really useful for us. And Derek's going to go through the detox panel and the energy and performance panel. We'll probably spend a little bit more time on the detox panel because there is a bit more that goes into that. And there's a lot more that we actually know about that when it comes to like a lot of the research in, genetics. And we'll elaborate on that with the PowerPoint that he's got going on. But we're going to start with the PowerPoint, and Derek will take it over from here. And then I'll just chime in every now and then, depending on what, people are saying in the chat box here.
All right. So Shane's not here. I know he's also kind of sad about not being here, because today we're going to cover some of his favorite things, including detoxification of microplastics. Okay, so here we are at the My DNA report. Once you log in, you can view your report. We went over cardiometabolic and cellular health last time. Like I said, we're going to go over detox and energy performance. So the first one we'll look at real quick is energy performance. A lot of these this is kind of a catch-all for different things or maladies people might have, including fatigue or fibromyalgia, sleeping, and generalized pain or injury, and also poor keto diet responses in here. So those are some interesting ones that people might like to know about and might be helpful for you to help to diagnose somebody. For example, just here in fatigue, we have quite a few genes and SNPs that correlate with somebody who might be feeling fatigued. It might just be something in their genetics, and many of these genes also correlate to other pathways we've already talked about, including the MTFHR, one of the more famous SNPs. But like Matt said, we're mostly going to focus on the detox panel today, which mostly includes a lot of pathways involved in detoxification.
I know for a lot of the clients that I speak to, right, a lot of people have programs set in place for detoxification, right? And detoxification is you have phase 1 through 3. Right? Phase 1 is more like the breaking down of compounds. Phase 2 is mostly what we're looking at here. There is both, but this tells you a lot about the conjugation pathways. And these are the ones that are binding to the toxins. And then phase 3 has to do with like the lymphatic system, all the excretion portion of detox. And he's got a whole thing we're going to go through about this. But
Matt's spoiling it a little bit. But generally, a lot of times, in general, when people hear the word detox, they either think about what Matt was talking about or some extreme example of like, I'm only drinking celery water for the next 14 days. and so we're more talking about what Matt was talking about, like the pathways in our body that help eliminate toxins, as opposed to extreme dietary version, which I would rarely recommend.
Yeah. And these things are so important because now, like maybe 20 years ago, you wouldn't have to worry as much about your detox genes, but now you cannot get away from these things. Every person, especially in human testes, for instance, right? All the research that comes out on that, you can't get away from these things. They will find them in your system, right? And we're bombarded with so much at once where it's almost impossible to not require something to support your natural detox pathways, because there's so many things bombarding you. Every sample of water. Andrew Huberman for Stanford, he does this podcast, and he's a very, he tries to be as unbiased as he can. He's saying that even the tap water that you're drinking you almost have to filter it now just because of what's being allowed into the system, right? So, this is really important for every single human, whether or not they have dirty genes per se for, detoxification or not.
Yeah, and so I've clicked here first on the impaired acetylation pathway. There is mostly one important gene, if you'll notice, it's the same gene over and over again, just different things that can be wrong with it. Either there are people who are normal or fast acetylators or slow acetylators. In this case, you don't want to be a slow acetylator because it just means that you eliminate toxins and drugs a lot slower. So anytime you have one of these SNPs here, I want to say deleterious, but what would you say, like broken? Each one adds up. It makes you slower and slower. So this person here probably has a few, but not all of them. That's why they're at medium risk. But yeah, going back on, and then there's the same thing here. Glucuronidation pathway, it's the same gene, just broken in different ways. This person is high for those. Glutathione conjugation pathway. There's a few varying genes here that are involved with the glutathione conjugation. Methylation is one of the more famous ones that people love, but it's also a detoxification pathway. Most people think of it as just for methylation, but methylation is involved in detox. And additionally, the sulfation pathway, which deals with the sulfur transferase genes. So I was going back to the point about plastics. I was talking with Shane about this, and he's been deep diving microplastics for a while. And he's basically come to the conclusion that avoiding them is best, except for that's also impossible. Just earlier today, I was in Matt's office, and I was like, hey, we're going to talk about microplastics. And Matt's one of the healthiest guys I know. And he's sitting there eating a yogurt that's in a plastic container. He's pouring seeds into it out of a plastic bag. And so it's basically unavoidable at this point. So what Shane's philosophy is, how he's described it to me, is we can't avoid them. So we need to essentially supercharge our detox pathways to handle all of this plastic load that we're just going to accumulate throughout our lifetimes. So to that end, I've prepared a but a PowerPoint slide to kind of show some of these things in greater detail. We are going this way. Okay. All right. So in general, Matt was talking about the detoxification pathways. Your toxins come in to the liver, go through phase 1 and phase 2, and then are eliminated through waste pathways, either through the gallbladder and down through your intestines, or to the kidneys and out through your urine. So these are generally, this is the most simplified version I could find of how this system works. But basically, detoxification is the way that we eliminate toxins from our body, including plastics. Again, the key organs were the liver, kidneys, lungs, gallbladder, skin. And essentially, phase 1 in the liver is to modify these substances to increase their water solubility. So the only way for us to get rid of these toxins is to modify them so that they'll flush out. Phase 2 is then conjugation to further enhance their elimination. And it's super important to eliminate these environmental toxins and just general toxins that are accumulated in our foods. This is the same pretty much, except for we're now identifying the key pathways that we talked about in the DNA test: acetylation, glucuronidation, glutathione conjugation, sulfation, and methylation. Understanding these pathways is critical, but again, we have taken a lot of the complexity of these systems. Like, you can go in and look at every single gene individually, but we've taken them and kind of already done the math for you. So this way you can pass along the information to your clients without having to bog them down in like the nitty gritty of what each enzyme does.
And keep in mind too, as we go through a lot of these pathways, the supplements that Shane's created that has to do with the upregulation of a lot of these, I guess you could say, management of dirty genes for detoxification. These programs cover every single one of those pathways. We have a product that does that, right? We have the roadmap, which is a 4-month program that will do that. And it's kind of scary to think of, we're worried about being in contact with these things, right? We know that plastics act as estrogens, right? They're some of the toxins actually, if you look at some of the research that we put into the Biogenic, we have a lot of the research in there that mentions how toxins actually they screw with your genes. They do things to you. They actually manipulate your genes when you're in contact with these toxins. Some of it can be a double-edged sword, right? Because supplements like curcumin, for instance, right? Curcumin is one of those things that they call it poor bioavailability, because some of these good detoxification pathways actually take curcumin and pull it out of the body, which is why they added bioperine to do a bunch of things, right? And so think of it as, if it's bad, you can do cool stuff, right? You say, hey, curcumin will be more effective if it's worse. But at the same time, other things won't happen. Whereas, okay, I have estrogen dominance, right? My body's trying to excrete all these hormones, and this is the pathway it goes through, right? It actually goes out the colon, right? A lot of the estrogens. And so if you have either an unhealthy microbiome or unhealthy detox genes, you're going to have a harder time balancing your hormones, right? Because you're trying to excrete them, and your body's either having an unhealthy microbiome that you just reabsorb, or your detox genes are all goofy. So what we're going through right now is going to be extremely helpful in your practice for, anybody with, even if you're not thinking detox, hormones, right? Knowing how you can specifically utilize certain phytochemicals from plants based upon what their genes are for these detox.
Yeah. And so again, most of this takes place in the liver. And the reason we want to get rid of these toxins, like he just talked about, they mimic the endocrine system. Especially a lot of the plastics, they very biosimilar to estrogens. And all it takes is one little site on it to look like an estrogen. It will bind somewhere and start essentially causing a cascade of problems down pathways that weren't meant to be activated normally. The other bad thing is these tend to build up in us. Like Matt said, it's in the water. More water you drink, which we are supposed to drink water, you'll just keep getting more and more. So the only way to get rid of these things is to try to optimize your detoxification pathways. And again, a lot of this there's a lot of things you can do without supplementation, but supplementation is the final step to really bring these up to their full capacity. Things like drinking water, hopefully filtered, so you're getting rid of the plastics. But so let's talk about the acetylation pathway. So I did talk about a little bit. It's mostly in the N-acetyltransferase gene. This one is actually kind of hard. There's no known supplementation that increases the ability of these enzymes to work. So in order to help this pathway along, you actually have to lessen the load of all the other detox pathways. So this is important where there's not a lot of supplements that will work for acetylation. But if you are a slow acetylator, you need to take the load off of these other detox pathways so that it can function at its highest capacity. Also, increasing your water intake to helps ease your elimination of these toxins.
You should be able to find online too, Google Scholar, or even now they have like AI consensus that you could go to, and you can see if you could find some of the compounds to avoid, because a lot of this is avoiding, right? And so if you can find which compounds require acetylation, you should be able to find those somewhere, so you could kind of pinpoint, I really need to avoid that, maybe more than others because my acetylation pathway is a little bit slower, goofy, right?
Yeah,
so there's some cool stuff you can do.
And there's a few, I don't have them listed here, but there are a few things that if you are a slow acetylated, you might want to avoid eating, actually. And I wish I had that on me and had a photographic memory like Shane does, but I don't recall that one. Almost as important as the glucuronidation pathway, this is one of the major ones that gets rid of unwanted hormones. Here's kind of a little picture again that kind of shows that you have all kinds of things coming into your body, things that you want to have, things that you don't want to have, and things that are just introduced through diet and or the environment. Glucuronidation is essentially, it adds a glucuronidide or glucuronic acid to that molecule, making it more water soluble and more easy to eliminate from the body. There's a ton of these things that get glucuronidated, including hormones and drugs and other pollutants, as well as plastics.
And before, if you remember, I was talking about the microbiome. At least this is being regurgitated from Shane, by the way. I'm not a microbiologist by any means. more dietetics, right? But he was trying to explain to me, I'll give you the layman's term version. There's your microbiome. If you have unhealthy bacteria, apparently those bacteria, and they might be good bacteria too, I can't remember, but it's the overgrowth of a bacteria that makes a glucuronidase enzyme, right? They're going to basically unbind these compounds, which are hormones, right? So that's why they see a little bit of dysbiosis issues with people with estrogen dominance, because that bacteria is making glucuronidase, which is unbinding these toxins, which your body's trying to, eliminate. And then you just reabsorb it again because your microbiome was, breaking that bond, and you're basically sucking back up the stuff that you were trying to get out through glucuronidation. So they'll have more videos coming soon on that pretty soon.
Right. And again, you notice it's the UGT enzyme that plays this role. And when you have SNPs, or essentially mutations in that gene, it will function at a suboptimal or even a very poor level. Similar, but just a different compound, is glutathione conjugation. This one is a powerful antioxidant, and it helps with reactive oxygen species and heavy metals. The nice thing about this is you can supplement very easily for this using L-glutathione. There, we have which form do we use in our supplement?
We have one of the newer ones they call it reductase or acetyl. Okay. There's like a newer version. I can't remember how many years that is, but we also, we give you your exogenous, we give you the actual glutathione, but we also make you make more by utilizing some of these genes. We're going to upregulate those. And then we do have the precursors too, like the N-acetylcysteine, right? So we've covered both the front to back end on everything that has to do with your body's ability to make glutathione. You can look into that if you see that your glutathione pathway is lackluster per se.
Yeah. And again, just as a very simple version of just showing you taking this glutathione and essentially attaching it to the toxin through this enzyme, the GST, and that helps prepare it for water solubility and elimination through whichever pathway it needs to go through, either through the gallbladder or through the kidneys. Sulfation, same thing, different molecule. We're just adding sulfate to the toxins to create their water solubility. It helps detoxify plastics and hormones as well. Molybdenum is one of the key metals you can add, but there are other nutrients that support this pathway. And do you know of any of those specifically, Matt?
Off the top of my head, I don't have the exact, this is the exact toxin.
Yeah.
Or this is the exact one you should avoid. Right. Obviously it's going to be microplastics of some sort, PFAs are the big one that we're trying to avoid. So that might be worth something looking into. And if you call us, even though we don't know off the top of our head, right? Yeah. I guarantee you Shane knows off the top of his head, or we can get that research for you and be like, hey, if you have a question on, which toxins to avoid, we can get you a list of that. Actually, that's actually really smart. We're going to make a big list. After this, I'll get with him and I'll get with, we'll call Shane and say, hey, we're going to make a big list, and we'll actually try to have something made, a document, PDF document that will have all of these pathways and then a lot of the common toxins that you're trying to avoid, that you can just, use in your practice. Maybe that's what we'll do.
Yeah. And here's just kind of a recap. It's just different molecules following the same thing. We're just hooking them onto those toxins and making them more soluble for elimination. Methylation is a different way of detoxing, but many of you are familiar with this. This was the solution that Moore's helped with. Now we have methylgenic, which is the updated version of a methylation pathway supplementation. Again, super important. I know many of you are very well versed in this pathway. I'm sure you are as well.
Mm-hmm. The new one it's an upgrade. It's very similar, but we cover all of as many methylation pathways as we could think of, right? For anything that has to do with creating methyl donors or having the precursors to make methyl donors, so that you can do cool things. Make the SAMe, make the the betaine, the choline. We have all those donors free, like we have the precursors to them, and then we actually give you methyl donors too, right? We put the trimethylglycine or the betaine in there, right? The choline is in there, the SAMe is in there. Those are already pre-made donors, but we also have all the methylated B vitamins, and you can make those. Shane's gone from front to back on that one too. It covers literally everything for that.
Yeah, I was gonna say I have written here folate and B12, but Shane actually has the most available. And whilst like there's different forms of these two, I should have put the correct versions that are actually in our formulations, but those are the most up-to-date and most bioavailable forms of those. Another thing that's in there that's it's not really a pathway, but that's in the DNA is oxidative stress. This is actually really bad. It causes a lot of things. This is where you get involved with your SOD genes, the superoxide dismutase genes. And so you can see here, I've just created a thing. So basically, if you have more reactive species than you do have of antioxidants, they kind of get out of balance, creating more oxidative stress. That's why you have antioxidant, is because it's antioxidative stress, essentially. And so when you are imbalanced and have more reactive oxygen species than antioxidants, you'll cause your body to go into oxidative stress. And many of these things are, again, there are enzymes that help interact with these reactive species with the antioxidants. And if you have, again, broken forms of these enzymes, it's a lot harder for you to neutralize these reactive oxygen species without additional supplementation.
A lot of times you'll see, especially for like superoxide dismutase, you might see something in their genes that has to do with like selenium. A lot of people for superoxide dismutase, SOD requires, some precursors, right? So some people require more selenium. And one thing to keep in mind for somebody that has this specific, concern, we do have the meta-oxy test, which we renamed to uroxy. And that is basically measuring this in your urine. It measures lipid peroxidation, which is these are ruining a cell wall. Lipid bilayer, right? The cell wall ruins it, basically. And that byproduct of that shows up as aldehydes in your urine. And so it'll be like a color change. It's literally a little vial that you're just adding urine to. And as that color changes, the more red means the more aldehydes, which means the most the oxidative stress you have in the body. So you could, if you had this come up on the DNA test, you could say, well, this is curious. Let's take this and see where it's actually at. Your genes are bad. Let's see. And you can take the uroxy. It can get people to start your programs. It's a really good marketing tool as well.
Again, another thing that's become more and more unavoidable is pesticides in our foods. I was just going to tell people one of the best things you can eat are these antioxidants, fruits and vegetables. A lot of them are berries. And what are those loaded with? Pretty much every pesticide they can throw at them. So again, wash your produce and make sure that you're getting off as much pesticide as you can. Things are listed as organic. That just means that they're using non-man-made chemicals as pesticides, which you're still getting natural pesticides. Most organic things still have some form of pesticide on them. There's a certain lists that you can use that will allow you to be organic, even though there's not a pesticide free. If that was actually a label, I would buy that stuff, but most places don't actually have that.
Yeah, even if they aren't using the pesticides, they'll wind up in there somehow, right? It's near impossible. And you could do the bare minimum, like even just doing baking soda and water alone, let it sit for like 10 minutes or so would be at least, even though you can't get rid of all of them, it'll probably help a lot just doing that alone, right? I know there's some machines you can buy now too, where you put it almost looks like a basket. You turn it on. I don't know what.
I
don't know what they're doing, but you just turn it on and you put a little baking soda in there and it cleans up. Okay. You could do that too. It could help with this.
And then this is one of the pathways that the glutathione conjugation is responsible for this elimination. But you'll also see that a lot of the CYP genes are involved in it as well. Basically, the metabolism of all these different chemicals. And the PON1 gene is also super important with pesticide toxicity. And all these things are contained in our test, and that's why you'll see your risk for pesticide toxicity. So again, detox is super important for it in general. But if you are at medium or high risk for those, you'll want to seriously look at ways that you can augment your detoxification pathways. We've kind of harped on the microplastics again. Again, they're just everywhere and they're basically impossible to avoid, but you should try, let's skip over some of these. You should try to eliminate as much plastic exposure as you can. Don't drink out of water bottles from the store. Try to get a water filter, use stainless steel or glass containers. Just because we drink so much water all the time, you don't want to introduce more plastics than you have to, essentially.
Be wary of anything that has temperature or anything that's like, I know one of the biggest culprits is like cutting boards, right? Those plastic cutting boards when you're cutting meat and stuff, and
Just chop up little pieces of
chopped
plastic.
up little pieces of plastic that you. And I know air quality. If you live in Utah, I mean, you're basically your lungs are. Yeah, you might as well call yourself a smoker at this point with how the air quality is here. I think it's something like throughout a couple months, you breathe in almost, what was it, 2 credit cards worth of like plastic. So it's not like a fun situation to be in if you're in those high pollution areas.
Yes. So again, try to minimize it as much as you can, but also know that don't freak out because we're still alive and we are breathing in plastic all the time. But just know that you have to adapt and figure out new ways to again increase your detoxification abilities. Essentially, the environment's changing faster than our body's ability to handle those things. So that's why we have to supplement for some of those things. You can introduce a healthy diet. That's one of the big things you can get to increase your detox is essentially, Shane likes to call it eating the rainbow because all of the different bioflavonoids are essentially these antioxidants. Again, make sure that you're washing them and trying to get organic where you can.
Some of your favorite ones that are good go-tos for detox pathways are always going to be your brassica and your alliums. And those are your garlics, right? You have your garlic and onions, right? And then the brassicas are going to be your broccoli, cauliflower. There's things in there called, I think they're isothiocyanates. And they're really cool compounds that they have a bunch of effects on the body outside of just detox. But, one thing is, I know a lot of people are like, oh, broccoli tastes really bad and I don't want to eat it raw. And there's actually a trick that I learned that's pretty cool where you basically cook your broccoli or your cabbage, which is actually kind of cool because if you cook the cabbage, I think the anthocyanins they're more bioavailable. However, you destroy the enzyme called myrosinase. But you can add myrosinase back just by taking mustard seed as a spice rack, right? Just buy it at the store. Sprinkle the mustard seed on there. That adds the myrosinase back. And then when you eat the food, you'll get more the isothiocyanates. They'll combine together and make like sulforaphane and indole-3 carbinol and chrysin. There's all these cool compounds that are made. So that's a little trick you can do for diet-wise. Our supplement, the Hormonogenic, actually has those compounds in there too. So if you want to supplement, we have that as well.
And additionally, the Terra superfood is actually many of these things all just chopped up and dried so that you don't have to taste bad flavors. Essentially.
Yeah, think of it as like a your morning, you put in every vegetable, you ground it up and you drink it down. That's basically what the Terra is.
It's kind of like an instant green smoothie, kind of.
Yeah, like a greens drink, like a everyday fruits and vegetable drink.
So that's an easy way to get in some of your different nutritional items that maybe we just don't have time or money for, I guess, is the way to put it. Or we just don't like the flavor of them. We have different supplements we've talked about. I didn't list some of them, but probably one of the major ones for this is Detoxogenic. Again, it includes many of these compounds we've talked about. And not only are the Alimentum Labs Genic lines now, Shane's updated them to make sure that they are clinical levels of these important ingredients, but they also contain essentially what Matt was referring to as like these helper compounds. Like if you just supplement with just a single thing, it doesn't usually work as well by itself as when you combine it with other things to help it be assimilated into the pathways more readily.
And Shane's done both that, and he makes sure that when we do put an ingredient in there, that we don't go off, I don't want to say pseudoscience, but we don't go off of, what somebody says. We go off what actual either university research or paper they came out to make sure that all the doses are in clinical dosing so that when we say it's doing something, it's actually doing what it's saying because we have the research to back it up that this is how much you need to do that per se. It's kind of like the toxin makes the poison quote that you sometimes hear, but the dose makes the relevancy of the product too. So he's also added higher doses compared to what they used to be.
Yeah. And so like we had talked about here, the Detoxogenic helps these different pathways push those toxins out and eliminate them through your gallbladder and intestines. That's where BindGenic comes in as well. So once it's out, it binds onto those things so they can't be reabsorbed while they're waiting to be eliminated.
Mm-hmm. And we have, so if you think phase 1, 2, and 3, right? Phase 1 and 2, you're going to think, detoxigenic, methylgenic, right? The BindGenic would be part of phase 3. We have another phase 3 product that's called lymphgenic, which is actually lymphatic and glymphatic for the brain. So you can combine those 4 and you'll have every part of that covered from top to bottom.
Sorry, I forgot to include that one. Yeah, so in conclusion, again, we know plastics are bad. We need to try and figure out ways to avoid them, but also to help our bodies eliminate them more efficiently. Using the MyDNA test, you can figure out which pathways may need additional help beyond just the normal supplementation. And so I think that's most of what I had for detoxification. So everyone hopefully understood what we talked about. And I think that was pretty heavy, and I'm glad that you stuck with us. Again, the general idea that Shane wanted us to convey is avoid microplastics, but he's asking you to do the impossible. And so we're coming up with ways to help you get rid of the plastics more readily in your body.
Mm-hmm. And I know too, if you come up with questions afterwards, just shoot your rep an email, shoot info@systemicformulas.com an email. We'll be able to answer any of those questions. And I know, this was the Detox and Energy report, right? But all the reports, a lot of them can affect others, right? Like your heart affects your brain. So it's good to know that if you have a really healthy heart, or you're getting all your genes taken care of that are in your brain panel, that's going to help a lot of what has to do with mental health, right? If you look at people that have, comorbidities when they're going through Alzheimer's, a lot of that is, they have diabetes as well as heart problems at the same time. So, and then they, end up getting Alzheimer's in the later end of life. So it's really good to look at all your panels, even though we are deep diving on each one. But, I've got, personal examples of, my own friends and family that I've looked at their entire panel, and as you look through these things, you'll start connecting dots, and you'll be like, oh, even though I'm not focused, maybe specifically on their mental health, this over here indirectly affected their mental health. Because we got the microbiome panel, right? The one that has to do with your holobiome, your whole, genetics that have to do with, was a hologenome panel?
Yeah.
The bugs, if you fix that will directly affect all your 12 organ axes. So even though it's not the brain panel, it's going to help your brain pretty drastically, to be honest.
And in addition with these questions, we're also looking for suggestions. So we covered what we think is a decent amount of the detox pathways. There are more. We are planning on adding some of them. But if you have any suggestions or things that you would like to see in the test, just shoot them over. They'll come to me, and we'll see what we can do. Again, I think we talked about this last time. That's the nice thing about our test, is it's essentially infinitely upgradable. You'll never have to retake the test in order to gain access to a new report.
And I know some companies make you pay for a subscription fee, right? Whereas, at least as of now, we don't have a subscription fee for, whoever takes that test. We just upgrade it as things happen, right? If something else comes out that Derek learns in genetics, right? We're not going to be like, hey, give us $25, we'll add it to your test, right? He's going to throw it on there. And the next time you go and look at your panel, you'll see a new genetic thing, or I don't even know, whatever the heck you would add, but anything that he sees in genes that needs to be added, it's added automatically.
Yeah. For example, there's a few that have already popped up, things like skin sensitivity, the NRF2 detoxification pathway. It's a very specific one, but somebody asked about it. We can throw it on there. Didn't realize there'd be interest in it, but yeah.
Don't be afraid to make recommendations too, because I know a lot of people have already been using this test. And so if you see something, you're like, hey, this might be cool for them, reach out to your rep, send us an email. Remember the info@systemic. You could say, hey, what would you think about adding this? We're building this around a community of practitioners that really want to improve their practice. And so, yeah, we can create this thing, but it's really nice to have your guys' input because we care about you. We want to help you and your business succeed. So don't hesitate to reach out to us and communicate with us because our ears are open,
Yeah. Well, we have a few good questions here now that are popping in. There is a good question here that says, if you could choose one of the products that would be the best overall, what would that be for detoxification?
Probably be a mixture of what detoxogenic and Terra superfood. Probably.
Yeah.
Probably between those two, it'd be a pretty tough battle.
Generally, what we would probably recommend is to rotate through all of them over the course of a few months. But if you wanted just one for one time only, detoxogenic would probably be the most generalized one.
And the supplement recommender will also tell you, because it'll give you a list of importance. The DNA, you run your genes, and then we run the product recommender, and so it'll give you the top 6 products. And so most of the time, if you had some kind of an issue with your detox genes, that'll probably be on the first 6 recommendations. So that would be like your best product for your specific need there anyway. So it's kind of taken care of in that aspect too. But those kind of questions too, you can reach out to your reps for, or we have Jack Tips. You guys probably see Jack Tips. He's in our Facebook group. So get in the Facebook group. That's a fun time. Jack is in there. And when you put his answers are absolutely like there, he dots his I's and crosses T's. He doesn't miss much. He covers everything on that. So those types of questions that you just had here, throw it in that Facebook group too. And Jack will be happy to answer those. It's a good time.
And on you said it's not called the Metaoxy test anymore. Uroxy test, do you do that first thing in the morning or anytime?
So that one's cool. That one, it really depends. You want to try to keep all the variables the same, right? Obviously, in the morning, if you're dehydrated, it might, have a higher concentration of aldehydes. If you take riboflavin, for instance, that might make your pee more yellow. And that it's a gradient test. So it's a color, a chromatic, right? So if you pee and you have a lot of riboflavin in your pee, it might make it look more red as well than another time that you didn't have riboflavin or your pee was more clear, right? So generally we recommend sometime in the morning, not too dehydrated. And then the next time, if you're trying to track your changes, right? The next time you do it, you would try to do that in the morning at the same time with the same variables if you can try to keep them the same. Because I've seen people that have taken the test and they come back to the meeting and they're like, well, what the heck? I'm worse than I was before. And then you ask, you dig a little deeper and they're like, well, I actually worked out at 6 o'clock and I took it at 7, right? And working out is naturally going to raise that, right? So try to keep the, I guess, like I said, the variables the same when you're doing it. That's probably the most important part so you can get an accurate, guesstimate on where your oxidative stress levels are.
I have a 14-year-old about to DNA test. Do I register on my name or her name? What I would probably do is register that one under your email and then just keep track of her barcode so that way you will know that her test with that barcode is her. But you could probably even put in a pseudonym if you're worried about privacy. Again, we've gone to the far side of security, so you don't have to worry about it getting out. But if you do want to take an extra step, you just put her first initial of her name or something like that. I say her, but it could be, you said her. So yeah. Use a pseudonym or just keep track of the kit ID so that when you have multiple on your email, you'll know whose corresponds to who. Does the Metaoxy test cover ammonia?
That one might be available more on like those. You can buy those pee strips, not the keto one, like we used to have them a while ago, but I know we discontinued them because there wasn't a lot of people that were utilizing it. But it was their pee strips that could test levels of a lot of things in your urine. So that might be an option for that specifically. But for the Uroxy, I wouldn't use it specifically for that. No, it's mainly going to be the lipid peroxidation, testing that with the aldehydes.
Does the product recommendation list why each product is recommended? Is it in a printable format? So the way the product recommender works is it goes through and we've assigned different products to different conditions at different levels of importance. So it goes through and essentially extracts the most bang for your buck, essentially. What is the most recommended product? And it will go through and essentially count it up for you, which is the most one. And so it doesn't list why, but it does go through and it essentially counts up what is the most important one that shows up the most on your highs. Oh, there it is.
It really allows you to throw a protocol together, right? And your genes never change. So you could pick 1 to 5 of these products and have a long-term protocol as well, or like a maintenance protocol, because like I said, your genes never change. You just have to deal with them long term. So you could do like, hey, these 3 products, now that you're done with my 30-day challenge or my 90-day challenge, most people are doing a 30-day and 90-day in some kind of a big program, right, as their offerings, right? And then have your different tiers and have DNA be maybe over here, or maybe DNA is over here in the 90-day challenge, where you do a program. And we recommend doing the roadmap. It's a 4-month program that will cover all of these genetic issues, as well as correcting the microbiome. They call it we call it the holobiome approach, the holobiancy and stuff like that. So we manage both of those with that. And then if you do a DNA while you're doing the roadmap, once they're done, the DNA test will actually be available for you to be able to take long-term results, right? So once you're done with the 4-month program, you just look at your DNA test and you go, oh, look, well, I know that these products will be your maintenance products. So take these and then come back to me in 3 months and we'll reassess and see what else is on your DNA test that we might want to, revolve around, right? Even some of the I got guys that even if you're not sick, a DNA test, like for me, I like working out, right? And so I found out that I had the genetics to, when I'm doing my eccentric, I break down more muscle tissue than somebody else doing eccentrics. So there's some cool stuff that you can learn for your DNA test.
And stuff you didn't know, like selenium.
Oh yeah, that's actually specific to me. And he's actually looked at my DNA, and I don't have good selenium metabolism. And so I actually require way more selenium than somebody else. So I eat Brazil nuts. So another one was my iron, right? I had weird iron metabolism. I had weird ability to utilize vitamin C. And so I knew just from my nutrition panel how much better I felt, right? And if you combine all these aspects, right, like my vitamin C, my iron, my selenium, right? I cover those. I looked at my methylation pathway. Is it fine, right? Is it not? I had bad PEMT, which is choline, right? So you'll start figuring out as you add these things back into your life that you feel a lot better, like night and day difference.
And so this is Matt, who's like super knows all of this stuff. And so he can go in and look at his and figure that out. That's what the product recommender is taking the place of. It's essentially like a little mat that goes in and just tells you these are the things that are most beneficial, without having to like agonize over each product and each high risk trait. Follow-up question: is it in a printable format? Not yet. I'll leave it at that because it's going to see a huge upgrade, but I have no timetable for that, not in control of that. But we've heard that, and it is coming soon. And I've seen some mock-ups, and it's going to be really nice.
It's pretty. Yeah, stay excited because there's going to be. We're always coming out with new products. I don't even know if I don't know if I can tell you, but we got some cool new products coming out. We got new upgrades to the DNA. Keep these upgrades coming. And if I'm your rep as well, you can also send me emails if you have done a DNA test, right? Because Derek, he'll do a consultation with you until the end of January. We have one free consultation with Derek for all the DNA tests that you do. But I'm your rep as well. So once you've done it with him, right, and he's already done everything with you, I talk to him a lot, right? And so if you guys send me an email, I can do some of the stuff, look through and be like, okay, well, you should do this. You should do this. You'll probably know most of it already, from your results and what you go through with him. But, if I see something that Derek was like, hey, also check this out for this, I might be able to add it. And, I can look at your genes as well if you need me to go through it. I'm not an expert, obviously, like he is, but I'm free, right? It's not going to cost you anything. And you guys have access to me 24/7 anyway. So call me, text me, and email me, all that kind of stuff. I can, get you in hold with somebody that does know if I don't know. Right. So, is there any more in there?
I think, can someone take the 4 Genix that I listed on as a precaution without testing? Yeah, I don't see why not.
Yeah. Like I was saying before, remember I was talking about biohacking, right? Even if you're not per se bad in a certain gene or area, right? Like I don't have concerns with, what's a good example? Like, let's say somebody has good mental health. You can still take the Calmgenic. It'll still relax you. It'll still do a lot of cool stuff, right? I have a gene, I think it's TPH, tryptophan hydroxylase takes tryptophan and converts into 5-HTP, which is that whole pathway for like serotonin and melatonin, right? I love that thing, right? I utilize my microbiome in the Calmgenic to be able to make serotonin and melatonin as I need to so I can sleep and, function better, right? But some people don't have a bad tryptophan hydroxylase gene, but they still sometimes get anxiety or they might be all worked up from something that might have caused it, a stressor, external stressor that's not necessarily genetic, but you can take the Calmgenic. It's not going to hurt you, right? Same with like taking the collagen MB, right? You have good genes for muscle building, you can still build muscle, right? Like you can still take the supplements. They're still going to help out regardless.
Yeah. And the 4 Genix I listed, I can't think of a scenario where you could take too much of those things. The only ones I can think of specifically that can have potentially interactions are the neurogenic and Calmgenic. Mm-hmm. If you're on certain powerful prescription drugs for depression or Parkinson's. So the ones that I listed, you can take those without testing. You may find out you might want to take more than is recommended. But that's just kind of you can do it without testing. The testing just gives you a lot more knowledge and precision. Yeah, you feel like, maybe this isn't necessary because I have awesome acetylation pathway stuff. So yeah.
It might save you something on a protocol there. I know one of them too might be methylation. Sometimes, like I always tell people when they're taking the methylgenic to start with one pill, see how they feel first, and then, up the dose and then start seeing, gauge it, titrate it first, see how it works, and then go from there on the dosing. Yeah. Going forward.
All right. Well, I think that covers all the questions. Hope you guys learned something. Again, Shane's super sad he wasn't here. That's why I prepared this with Shane being here in mind. And so that's why we're missing some of the more specifics on the actual supplement ingredients. That's not really my area of expertise. My biochemistry is about 20 years rusty at this point. So I can understand it, but I cannot spit it out off the top of my head. But yeah, thanks for coming.
Keep in touch. Send us questions.
Send questions, send suggestions. That's
the next one that we're going to do is going to be not this next Thursday, but the Thursday after that on 11/21. It'll be another series of this where we go through the DNA test, the MyDNA test. It'll be on the general health categories and the hologenomics. That's the cool one that I was mentioning before about how your genetics are affecting your microbiome and all this cool stuff with, I don't want to say leaky gut, but I think that's part of that with the genes in there.
Yeah, I would say hologenomics is probably one of the more cutting edge things. So we'll be adding to that on the regular. And general health, while the name sounds boring, actually has a lot of cool stuff in there, like longevity and other things that really didn't have a panel of their own. So this is almost like a miscellaneous. So there's some cool features inside of that one.
Yeah. So keep in touch. If you have any ideas for new features or concerns that you want to express about, what we can do to improve the DNA and, what you expect from us in the future, keep in touch with us because we definitely want to hear it. But like I said, next Thursday, 11/21, we'll see you again then. And
not next Thursday, but the one after. 2 weeks.
2 Thursday, 11/21. But in the meantime, get my phone number, shoot us emails and we'll keep in touch with you and get you any answers you need. Okay. Take care, guys.